Ban my kids from family trips with my father's wife who treats my daughter like her own and completely disregards our boundaries. My 32F father, 60s, has been married to Sasha, fake name, 40s, for almost a decade. I was already an adult when they started seeing each other, so I never had much of a relationship with her. That said, Sasha was nice and thoughtful, though a bit annoying at times, and I never had any problems with her. I now have a husband, 34M, and 2 kids, 9M and 4F. Sasha is very fond of my children, especially my daughter. That became very suffocating pretty quickly, so we started setting some boundaries. She never overstepped them. In January, my father and Sasha decided to go on a trip to Disney World, and invited us to join them. We decided to go to celebrate our son's 9th birthday. I quickly regretted coming along. Sasha spent the entire trip fussing over my daughter in ways that overstepped almost every boundary we'd set. Examples include, there were more instances. The final straw for me, however, was the last park day of the trip. We were at Magic Kingdom. My husband suffered a minor injury and I had to take him to the first aid station. The kids wanted to go to the Peter Pan ride, so my dad and Sasha offered to take them in the meantime. However, according to my father, the line was too long. So instead, Sasha suggested the Little Mermaid ride, assuring my kids Ursula wasn't on it. Actually, there's a pretty big Ursula animatronic there. My daughter was still sobbing and hugging her brother when we reunited. When we flew back home, I told my father that we'd no longer take our children on trips with Sasha due to her behavior. He got extremely angry. He said his wife loved my kids, thought about what they'd like to do at every moment of the trip, and that we should be grateful to have her in our lives. I lost my temper at that. I told him Sasha was a fucking creep, and that they should be grateful I was still okay with them even seeing my children after her actions during the trip. We ended up having a huge fight after that. It's been weeks since we returned home, and my father is still angry at me and my husband. Sasha has texted me a few times. She says she's sorry if she made me uncomfortable, but that she loves my kids and hoped to use the trip to spend more time with them. To be honest, I don't think I'm the here. But I do think I might have overreacted. I believe there's a chance Sasha's actions were motivated by love and she truly did have good intentions. Ida? Also, I will say that he got more birthday presents than his sister got Disney souvenirs, but no thanks to Sasha. When they gave him one of those happy birthday buttons, Sasha tried to ask for an extra one for my daughter so she wouldn't feel left out. I asked for a first visit one instead, but that was how Sasha behaved during his birthday. My husband and I started setting boundaries because the situation was really bad when my daughter was younger. She'd wake her up from her naps when she visited, post pictures of her on social media without our approval and complain about almost every parenting decision we'd make because it wasn't how she'd do it. Update 1. As much as Sasha's behavior towards my children angered me and freaked me out, calling her a creep was the wrong reaction to have. That said, I think it's best for my family to distance itself from Sasha for the time being. And at the very least, my previous decision to avoid future trips with her based on the Disney trip is still the best course of action. Sasha's pushiness, tendency to override my and my husband's parenting and blatant favoritism towards my daughter were much worse when the kids were younger. After my daughter's birth, she began to focus too much attention on her and almost none on my son. I gave more examples of that in the comments on my original post. That's the reason we set boundaries in the first place. Her fixation on my daughter also bothers me. When we had the boundary conversation with my father and Sasha, she told us that she'd always wondered what having a daughter would be like. She'd also defined herself as child-free before, so I was never certain what to think of that. Either way, that reassured me and my husband that we were doing the best for our kids. Those boundaries had never been overstepped. Then we went on the Disney trip, and most of them were completely ignored. Many of you pointed out that she might have gotten carried away, or that Disney is exciting and she wanted to make sure my kids had the best experience, etc. There are 2 things I'll say to that. The first is that whatever Sasha's reasons were, she still overstepped our boundaries. When we first set those, we told her that doing so would have consequences. Disney or not, I don't see a reason to make an exception. Secondly, she wasn't trying to ensure my kids had the best experience. She was pushing them to fulfill her fantasy of what their Disney trip should look like. She repeatedly ignored my children's wishes in favor of her own, despite them both being very clear about what they wanted and didn't want. Sasha also continually favored my daughter, including during my son's birthday, and fussed over her in ways that made her uncomfortable. And I still haven't forgiven the Little Mermaid thing. My daughter is a bit shy and takes a while to open up to most people, so knowing her trust was broken like that angers me in ways I can't describe. To put it in simpler terms, my children aren't props. And whoever treats them as such will, at the very least, be put in time out. I called my father and Sasha on Saturday. I apologized for calling Sasha a creep, but told them that we needed some time apart. They won't see my family until my younger sister's birthday in late April. If that goes well, they'll be invited to my daughter's 5th birthday party in May. After that, we'll slowly work on re-establishing contact. I also said that if they overstepped our boundaries again, the consequences would be more dire. My father didn't take it well. I don't care. Sasha sent me a text with more apologies, followed by a request to at least FaceTime my kids every now and then. I said no. And to those who said my controlling behavior ruined the trip, My kids had an amazing time at Disney World. They're both still talking about it. My daughter keeps asking us to put her pictures with the characters she met up on the wall, and my son says he had the best birthday ever. Update 2. Last time I posted here, I mentioned that my father and Sasha wouldn't see my children until my younger sister's birthday. The party took place last weekend, and we didn't attend. These 2 months of NC worked fine, but not great. My father respected my wishes, to my surprise, but Sasha kept trying to find ways to talk to my children. She'd call me under the guise of needing to ask me something, only to later say, "By the way, are the kids around? I want to say hi." Every time she tried that, I'd remind her of what I'd told her back in March. This must have happened almost a dozen times, which was enough for my husband and I to start debating on skipping the party. After speaking to our kids, we decided not to go. They both said they missed my father, but clearly didn't want to see Sasha. We thought about attending and just distancing them from her while there, but risking making our children uncomfortable wasn't worth it. My son even asked if we could see their aunt somewhere else, without Sasha around. My husband and I explained the situation to my sister. She was upset, but mostly because she hadn't seen the kids in a while. We all went to dinner at her favorite restaurant the day after her party. I also called my father and told him we wouldn't go to the birthday party. He reacted better than I expected, but we still had a short fight about it. He claimed that I had promised we'd let Sasha see the kids after 2 months, called me unfair and said he was entitled to have a relationship with his grandchildren. I immediately denied that. Though I tried to sugarcoat it at first, I eventually gave him the truth. My kids don't want to see his wife, and I won't force them to. My father and I had a long talk. I told him how much Sasha's actions at the Disney trip upset my children, as well as how uncomfortable me and my husband felt. I admitted I don't trust his wife at all, and I don't think I ever truly will. He said that while he still thought I was overreacting, he understood I wanted to protect my kids. My dad also told me about how these 2 months of NC were for them. Apparently, Sasha started talking about my kids, mostly my daughter, a lot more than usual. She'd mention things and places she thought they would like. My father was aware of one of the times she called me, but thought it was a one-time thing. She wanted to give my daughter a gift at my sister's birthday party. He said he didn't know why. At one point, she told him she wanted to plan another family vacation with the kids, even though I told them they're not traveling with Sasha anymore. Learning all of that just made me more certain that I can't trust this woman around my children. For now, I intend to remain LC with my father and NC with Sasha. My daughter told me she wanted her grandpa at her birthday party a few weeks from now, so I told him that he was invited, but Sasha wasn't. He agreed. To be honest, I don't trust my father after all of this. I'm allowing him to come because that party will take place at my home, which is easier for me to control. If he tries to bring Sasha, they'll both be kicked out, and it will take a long time for me to consider letting him near my kids again. My father hasn't told me how his wife is reacting to this. My sister told me that during her party, Sasha asked her to tell me she wanted to talk. I'm not reaching out to her, nor do I plan to respond if she attempts to contact me. Both me and my husband have blocked her. My children are doing great. They still talk about how much fun they had at Disney. My daughter's been saving money, putting coins in her piggy bank, for us to go back. On a completely different note, I'm pregnant again. This was completely unplanned. I always said I wanted 2 kids at most, and the third would have to be a huge accident, but my husband and I are ecstatic. I'm still in the first trimester, so not a lot of people know. We're brainstorming ways to tell our kids. Overall, I'm happy with my life right now. And as much as I wish this Sasha situation had never happened, I feel like a better parent after dealing with it. I have never been more confident in my abilities to protect my children than I am now. Update 3. First of all, my father didn't bring Sasha to my daughter's birthday party back in May. I didn't really think he would. I'd made it very clear I wouldn't tolerate that, but I'd be lying if I said your comments didn't make me a little paranoid. Secondly, I've just entered my 3rd trimester, and the baby will be here in November. The kids are ecstatic. I'm having another girl, but my husband and I are not sharing the sex until she's born. This has nothing to do with our families, it's just something we've also done with our first 2. Everyone, including Sasha, knows I'm pregnant. We announced it a couple months ago. I had no problem with my father telling her, though he did ask if he could. I didn't hear much about her reaction, but according to my father, she was happy for me. My children still don't want to see Sasha, and I'm still not forcing them to. I've unblocked her and put her on mute instead, but she hasn't made any attempts to contact me. We've continued meeting my father without his wife, and I think it's been working out. My relationship with him isn't fantastic, but it's much better than it was earlier this year. Last week, I saw Sasha for the first time in months. My cousin threw a party at her place. My husband and I attended, as did my father and Sasha. I knew she'd be there, but since the kids weren't with us, son had a sleepover, daughter stayed with my mom, I didn't really have anything against seeing her. They arrived some time after we did. My husband and I spoke with them for a few minutes, and it was less awkward than I expected. Sasha asked me about the baby's sex, and I told her we weren't telling anyone, which, again, is what we've always done. About 20 minutes later, my father told me they had to go. I thought it was weird that they were leaving so soon, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He called me a few days ago, and we spoke for a long time. My father is difficult to talk to, so the following is what I gathered from the conversation. He said they left early because Sasha was holding back tears after she saw me. She was sobbing by the time they got to the car. They later had a discussion about it, and Sasha admitted she wanted kids. She married my dad knowing he didn't, but hoped he would change his mind. Apparently, when my son was born, Sasha tried to drop "I want one" hints to my father. He didn't notice it, so she gave up. According to my father, Sasha told him she loved my kids equally, but my daughter was special, because she always imagined herself as a girl mom. That's also the reason why she became such a suffocating presence when my daughter was a baby. When my husband and I started setting boundaries, Sasha realized she was overstepping and agreed to abide by them. To her credit, I think she did a mostly okay job back then, but the favoritism was still obvious enough that my son noticed it. The trip we took was a turning point because Sasha's dream of having a daughter included taking her to Disney World and having her do all the things she liked to do there when she was young. She told my father that having my daughter there was so exciting that she forgot everything I'd said about not overstepping. Sasha wanted a mother-daughter trip, and tried to use my child for it. Sasha said she regretted her actions during the Disney trip, but only because she lost access to my children due to them. And seeing me at the party, all pregnant and pretty, my father's words, not sure she actually said that, was what drove her over the edge. I remember reading some comments theorizing that this was what was going on, but I still didn't really expect this. My father said he was telling me all this because his wife wasn't doing well, and he'd understand if I wanted to keep my kids away from her. Didn't expect that, either. I don't know what the future of their relationship will be, and I don't think my father does either. All I know is that if Sasha still wants to have kids, it almost definitely will not be with my father. Before all this, I was pondering about my third child's future in relation to Sasha. Now, I sincerely don't want her to be a part of my baby's life. This isn't a final decision, but I've been speaking to my husband about it, and he agrees with me. I don't think she's a bad person. I got some baby stealer comments on my previous update, but I don't think that's what's happening here, either. But if the Disney trip proved anything to me, it's that Sasha is willing to be extremely selfish and disrespectful to get what she wants, even when my kids are involved. A couple months ago, my husband and I had a conversation with our son about the subject. He told us he dislikes Sasha for 2 reasons. She favors his sister and she doesn't listen to them. Honestly, that's all I need to know. Looking back at my own childhood, I feel like I was never allowed to have boundaries. I was always expected to put my schedules and preferences aside for others. It's important to me that my children don't go through that. If they don't want to see Sasha, they don't have to. I think that's all I want to say here. Update 4. Let's start with the most obvious thing. The baby is here. Our third child, a beautiful, healthy baby girl, was born a few weeks ago. My husband and I are absolutely over the moon, and her older siblings are obsessed with her. Our son has taken his big brother duties to a whole new level, and our daughter is thrilled to finally have a little sister. Things have been chaotic in the best way possible, and despite the sleepless nights, I wouldn't change a thing. Now, on to the messier part of this update. I haven't spoken to Sasha since my last post, and my father and I have had very limited contact. He met the baby once in the hospital, but he didn't stay long. He seemed happy to see her, but also distracted, like he had something else on his mind. At the time, I chalked it up to him worrying about Sasha, but after what happened next, I think it was something more. A few days after we got home from the hospital, I got a call from my sister. She was furious. Apparently, Sasha had shown up at my dad's house with suitcases, telling him she needed time away to think about things. But when my sister visited a few days later, she found out that Sasha wasn't just staying there, she was moving out. It turns out, my father and Sasha are separating. According to my sister, who heard it from our dad, Sasha had been spiraling ever since that party where she broke down after seeing me pregnant. She had long talks with my father about wanting children, and it became clear that she never actually changed her mind about being child-free. She had just convinced herself he would come around. When she realized that wasn't going to happen, things got tense between them. My father admitted that after she opened up about her feelings, he felt relieved when I told him I didn't want her around my kids. He said it was like the pressure was off because deep down, he was starting to feel uncomfortable with how obsessed she was with my children, too. Sasha apparently begged him to consider just one baby, but my dad told her that wasn't fair to either of them. He wasn't going to have a child he didn't want, and she wasn't going to be happy living with that resentment. They started arguing constantly, and eventually, Sasha decided to leave. I have so many feelings about this. On one hand, I do feel bad for her. I can't imagine what it must be like to wake up one day and realize you built your entire life around something that wasn't true to yourself. I genuinely hope she finds peace and gets the life she wants. But on the other hand, I cannot get past the fact that she used my daughter to cope with her own regrets. I cannot excuse how she blatantly ignored our boundaries, how she lied to my kids, and how she kept trying to force herself into their lives even when they clearly didn't want her there. I think what disturbs me the most is the fact that she never seemed to feel guilty about it. She only regretted getting caught. Even now, part of me wonders what would have happened if I hadn't put my foot down. Would she have continued pushing my daughter into the role she wished she had? Would she have tried even harder to insert herself into our lives? The more I think about it, the more I realize how important it was that I stood firm in my decisions. And speaking of decisions, my father is a mess. He's been trying to act like he's fine, but I can tell he's struggling. My sister thinks he's grieving both his marriage and the realization that he allowed something deeply unhealthy to happen under his own roof. I don't know where he and I stand right now. I appreciate that he finally admitted there was a problem, but part of me still resents him for defending Sasha for so long. For now, I'm keeping things the way they are, low contact, no Sasha. I've made it clear to my dad that if he wants to rebuild a real relationship with my kids, he needs to earn it. No more brushing things under the rug. No more dismissing our feelings. And most importantly, no more expecting me to be the one to compromise. As for Sasha, I have no idea what she's doing now, and honestly, I don't care. My only hope is that she doesn't try to reach out to my kids in the future. I want her to move on, but I need her to stay away. Now on to second story. Served my husband divorce papers at his workplace after discovering his affair. Now he wants to reconcile, but the joke's on him. I, 59F, was married to my now ex, 57 male, we'll call him Ed, for 10 years, together for 13, but originally met him 40 years ago as teenagers. He was in my circle of friends, but we never dated. We used to live in Florida, but when I was 19 I moved back to Michigan, where I am originally from. 27 years later I went back to the city in Florida where I used to live to visit friends. I ran into Ed while on vacation and we began talking on the phone daily. 3 months later he left Florida and moved in with me. 3 years later we were married, not my first but his first. We had our ups and downs, but mainly we got along fine and didn't argue much. He would throw tantrums if things didn't go his way and would punish me by sleeping on the edge of the bed, which was fine with me, or he would not talk to me and slam things. 2 years into our marriage things went horribly wrong when he got into drugs. It was horrible. One night I finally had enough and was on the phone with my mill telling her I was sending back to Florida when the sheriff's department knocked on my door. Someone had found my husband unconscious, severely beaten, in a ditch a block from our house. We lived in a small village with woods across the street. I raced to the hospital and didn't recognize him when I saw him. He was so swollen and bruised. Now, my husband was a man who could fight and he was strong. Come to find out, it took 3 men to do this. They thought they could rob him since it was payday, but he had been home and purposely left his wallet at home. I sat with him 24/7 while he was in neuro/trauma ICU. I slept on a couch in his room, I prayed over him, I bathed him and took care of him even after he came home. This actually saved his life. He got clean and went back to work full time, always putting me and my grandson first before his needs. He went to work and came home. That's it. 4 years later I finished my education and became an ordained priest and have been the pastor at my church ever since. At first he didn't mind, but then he would say things like I didn't sign up for this even though I never pushed church on him. I knew he believed in God and he prayed daily. I would invite him to Christmas and Easter service and he also came when I ordained and when my grandson, who calls him Grandpa, was baptized. For several years things were really good. Then suddenly he began coming home from work, showering, changing clothes and leaving. At first he said it was to watch whatever sports was playing on TV because we didn't have live TV. Then he told me he'd be back whenever he got back. Then, things went back to how they were. We laughed a lot, we joked around, and I began getting the usual kiss goodbye before he left for work. One night, he had done his laundry, like he always did, and I talked to him while he was folding it. He never wanted me to do his laundry, so that wasn't new. We ended the night laughing as he was trying on old clothes. The next morning I woke up and went out to the living room to ask what time he had to be at work, but he was gone. I assumed he had to be there early. I walked back into the bedroom and saw his keys on the bed, which made me wonder why he would walk to work on such a cold day. It was December 1st. I started leaving the bedroom again and noticed his laundry basket missing, so I went to the laundry room and it wasn't there. I went back into the bedroom and noticed his closet empty. I called him to see where he was and asked if he had moved out, and of course his answer was yes. Come to find out, he had met a woman at his job who works for one of those shopping apps where people buy and deliver your groceries. He worked for a large grocery store chain. He had moved in with her. Over the next 6 months he called almost daily and would say things like, "Our marriage will survive this. Just give me time." He even told me he would be mad if I began dating. During one of our phone calls he told me he wasn't happy with her and was going down to Florida to visit family. He said he wanted to come back to me when he came back to Michigan. The plan was this. He would pack things that he couldn't live without but leave things at his new GF's house to make her think he was coming home to her. He planned on giving his 2-week notice while gone and planned on looking for another job when he came home. By this time I knew I didn't want him back. I found my self-worth again and had made new friends with neighbors once he was gone. Come to find out, nobody liked him. Even the women at the gas station across the street told me how he flirted with them when he came in. Even an elder at my church found out he was cheating but didn't tell me because she didn't want to hurt me. So I went to the courthouse and got a divorce package and filled out all of the paperwork. Where I live I was able to serve him myself. I decided that since he chose to end our marriage while working at the store, I would officially end it there. So, the day before he was supposed to fly to Florida I made sure I looked really good. New hairstyle, makeup, and my outfit was sexy. I went to his job, found him, and handed him the divorce papers. I told him that he was wrong. Our marriage wasn't surviving this. You should have seen his face. He was actually upset with tears in his eyes, and for a moment I felt bad. Then I reminded myself what he had done to me. He didn't just leave me in the middle of the night, but he stopped talking and doing things with my grandson, who thought grandpa was the greatest. He left me in a house that I couldn't afford without him, and I would have been homeless if my church wouldn't have paid for an apartment. He told me women were stupid. He actually thought he could come home as if nothing happened. That was one thing he said to me on the phone because I never brought up the past. Last week, 6 months after our divorce was final, my car was repossessed. When we were together, he got 2 loans and I agreed to use my SUV as collateral because I never pictured my life without him. He stopped paying on his loans, so they took my car. I wasn't notified because they sent him the letters. They wanted me to pay off his loans to get it back. I burst out laughing and said that will never happen. So, my question is, was I the off for serving him the way I did? Update 1. My now ex-husband got a loan while we were married and used my car as collateral. A year later he left me for someone he met at work. He kept telling me that our marriage would survive, just give him time. He ended up not being happy with her and planned to come back to me after he left to visit his family out of state. He planned on not telling his GF he was leaving her and was only packing what he couldn't live without. His plan was to return home to me when he came home. The day before he left to visit family, I served him with divorce papers. 2 weeks ago my car was repossessed and the bank wanted me to pay my car off $3,000 and his 2 loans that he stopped paying on, $5,700. I was willing to pay my car off but told them I'd never pay for his loans and they refused. Here's what happened since my post. I found out where my car was being held at, 2 cities away. When I went to their website I discovered that it's also the location where they sell the repossessed cars during an online auction. They hold it every Monday for 24 hours. I called and asked if I could have my belongings out of it and they said yes. When I arrived they had my things in a bag, including my license plate. I registered online and this past Monday began bidding on my car. I ended up buying my car for $2,700. When I showed up to get my car the people laughed and said I'm not the first person to do this. I put my plate back on and came home. Now, I know the bank can still come after me for the balance, but I honestly don't care if it hits my credit report. I don't use credit cards, and in October my daughter closed on a brand new house. I had no other bills except my cell and utilities. I'm now living with her and my grandson. I was lucky enough to have enough time in to retire when my muscular dystrophy began causing more health issues, and that money goes to my other bank. My mill was happy to give me his new address so I can sue my ex for my half of our income tax return that he kept last year. She's even having us, me, daughter, grandson, stay with her when we visit Florida during my grandson's spring break. She's still calling Ed's GF Teresa, Trina, Tracy, everything except her name, which does start with the letter T. I love this woman.